"There will come a time," Jesus said, "when the light will grow dim and hearts will grow cold." Brothers and sisters, last night, something happened that should shake every soul listening to this. An entire city, miles of streets, thousands of homes, was covered in a darkness no one could explain. Power lines were intact, streetlights were glowing, screens were bright, and yet, nothing illuminated the night. People stood under lamps and still could not see their own hands clearly, as if the light itself had lost its power. A strange silence filled the air, heavy and unnatural, pressing against the chest like a weight you couldn't escape. Some called it a glitch, others blamed the grid, but deep down, there was a feeling no one could ignore. This was different. This was not a failure of technology, but something deeper, something spiritual. And in the middle of that suffocating darkness, an old priest stepped outside his church, looked at the sky, and whispered words that would send chills through anyone who heard them. This is how it begins. The priest did not run. He did not panic. He walked slowly through the empty street as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. And those who followed him noticed something unsettling. The closer they stood to him, the more they felt the weight of the darkness pressing against their thoughts, like a silence that was not empty but watching. And then he opened an old Bible he carried, its pages worn and fragile, and began to read words that felt as if they were written for that very night. Words about a time when truth would be blurred, when people would see but not perceive, when light would exist yet fail to guide. And suddenly it became clear this was not about the sky or the city or electricity. This was about something deeper, something inside humanity itself, because the lights were still there, the power was still running, but the ability to see clearly, to feel direction, to recognize what is right and what is lost, that was what had begun to fade. And one young man standing nearby whispered in fear, "If the light is still here, then why can we not see it anymore?" The priest slowly closed the Bible, and for a moment no one spoke, because deep inside they already knew the answer. This was not a problem of sight. It was a loss of something far more dangerous. And as the silence stretched, the young man felt a strange unease rising in his chest, because even though his eyes were open, everything around him felt distant, unclear, almost meaningless. And then the priest turned to them and said in a calm but heavy voice that this is how it always begins, not with fire or destruction, but with confusion, with people no longer able to tell what is true, what is good, what is worth holding on to. And as he spoke, people began to notice something even more unsettling. Their phones were full of messages, news alerts, endless voices talking, yet none of it brought clarity, only more noise, more doubt, more division. And it was in that moment they realized the darkness was not covering the city, it was moving through their minds, slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly. And the young man whispered again, this time with fear in his voice, "If this is only the beginning, then what comes next?" The priest looked at the young man, and for the first time there was a deep sorrow in his eyes, not fear, but recognition, as if he had seen this pattern before. And he said quietly that what comes next is not louder, not more obvious, but more subtle, because once people lose clarity, they begin to accept what they once resisted, and slowly, without even noticing, they begin to call darkness normal and light unnecessary. And as those words settled, something shifted in the crowd, because they could feel it, that quiet drift, that slow compromise, the way truth had become something flexible, something debated instead of lived. And the priest continued, explaining that this is why the darkness feels so heavy, because it does not force itself, it invites, it suggests, it convinces, until people willingly walk into it thinking they are still in control. And the young man suddenly remembered how easy it had become to ignore what once felt sacred, how quickly conviction had been replaced by comfort. And in that realization, a deeper fear emerged, not of the darkness outside, but of how far it had already entered within them. The young man felt his chest tighten as the priest's words echoed in his mind, because what he was describing was not distant or abstract. It was already happening, quietly shaping thoughts, choices, and desires. And as he looked around, he saw it in others too. The hesitation, the uncertainty, the way people avoided eye contact as if they were suddenly aware of something they could no longer ignore. And the priest slowly raised the old Bible again, pointing, not to the sky but toward them, saying that the warning was never only about events in the world, it was always about the condition of the human heart, because when truth becomes optional and faith becomes convenience, the darkness does not need to attack, it simply waits. And in that moment, a faint glow appeared across the street, barely noticeable at first, like a small reflection in the distance. And those who turned toward it felt something different, a quiet pull, a sense of peace that did not match the fear around them. And the young man took a step forward, unsure why, but knowing something inside him was being called back. The glow grew stronger as the young man stepped closer, and with every step the heaviness in his chest began to lift, not completely, but enough for him to notice the difference, as if the air itself was changing, becoming clearer, lighter, and behind him he could hear the confusion of the crowd, some calling out, others turning away, unwilling to face what they did not understand. And the priest followed slowly, his voice calm but firm, explaining that the light has not disappeared, it has only become harder to see for those who no longer seek it. And as the young man reached the source, he realized it was not a streetlight or a screen, but a simple cross standing in front of a small church, glowing with a quiet, steady radiance that did not flicker or fade. And in that moment, he understood something that could not be explained in words, that the darkness was not stronger than the light. It only felt that way when people turned away from it. And as he looked back at the city still covered in that strange shadow, a question formed deep within him. How many others would choose to walk toward the light before it became too difficult to find? The young man stood before the cross, and for the first time that night, he could see clearly, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, something within him that had been silent for too long. And as the soft light touched his face, memories began to surface, moments when he had ignored truth, when he had chosen comfort over conviction, when he had slowly drifted without even realizing it. And behind him, the city remained restless, voices rising in confusion, people searching for answers in everything except what stood right in front of them. And the priest stepped beside him and said quietly that this is the moment where everything is decided, not in the chaos, not in the noise, but in the silence where a person chooses what they will follow. And as those words settled, the young man noticed something that changed everything. The light from the cross was not reaching everyone, not because it was weak, but because many had turned their backs, facing the darkness by choice. And in that realization, he understood the true weight of what was happening, that the division was no longer coming. It was already here, unfolding quietly between those who still seek the light and those who no longer do. The priest lowered his gaze and spoke with a quiet intensity that carried more weight than any shout, saying that this moment is not a punishment but a revelation. Because when the light is no longer easy to see, what remains in the heart is finally exposed. And the young man felt those words settle deeply within him, realizing that the darkness was not sent to destroy, but to reveal where each soul truly stands. And as he looked again at the city, he noticed something he had missed before: small movements, individuals quietly stepping out of the shadows, drawn toward the same gentle light, not by force, but by a longing they could not explain, while others remained distant, distracted, or unwilling to turn. And the priest continued, explaining that this is the mercy within the warning, that even now the light still calls, still waits, still welcomes those who choose it, but it does not chase, it does not compel, because love never forces. And in that realization, the young man understood that this was not about surviving a moment, but about choosing a direction, a path that would shape everything that comes next, not just for the world, but for his own soul. The young man took a slow breath, and in that quiet moment, everything around him seemed to fade except the soft glow of the cross, steady and unshaken, and he realized that the darkness had not come to end the world, but to reveal it, to show what had been hidden beneath noise, distraction, and comfort for so long. And as more people began to move, some stepping toward the light, others drifting deeper into the shadows, the contrast became undeniable, not forced, not sudden, but clear. And the priest spoke one final time, his voice calm, yet filled with gravity, saying that every soul will face this moment, whether in silence or in chaos, where the path is no longer unclear, where The choice is no longer delayed, and the young man understood that this night would not be remembered for the darkness that covered the city, but for the decision it demanded from every heart. And as he looked at the light once more, he knew this was not the end of something, but the beginning of everything that truly matters.